We do have our organizational priorities, from ensuring organizational health to national growth strategies, but specifically this college advising team pilot is one of the things that's reflective of us trying to optimize program outcomes for students. We are really about leveraging the data that we have to create experiences that are not only beneficial to students, but also change the trajectory of their outcomes to one that is positive and one's going to yield a lot of results for them in the future. So beyond that, I just think I'd like to take the second to introduce Dan Papson, who's been with Bottom Line for 3 years, since 2020. He's one of our managers for our success teams, but he's also leading some of the work around our college advising pilot. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce Dan Papson to this group.
Hello, thank you so much, Michael. Hi, everybody. Like he said, my name is Dan Papson, and I lead the collective advising team. Before we get specifically into that, I'm going to talk a little bit generally about our Bottom Line Success program. So when we say success at Bottom Line, we mean really from the time that you've been admitted to college, you've selected a college, you're now, you're able to be part of the success program, which means at its core, helping you succeed in college. So to do that, we use our DEAL model, which outlines the 4 areas of support that we focus on with students in the success program. The D in DEAL stands for degree. And so like you can see here, that has to do with really anything to do with academics. So that's majors, that's, selecting courses, it's improving academically if there's any sort of issue that comes up, time management, note-taking, those sorts of skills required to be successful academically. We support students with employability, that's our E. And so that has to do with planning for a career, right? So that can include resume work, it can include finding internships, it can include, connecting with volunteers. Many of you potentially on this call might have met with a student in the past to support them with one of those skills. And then we have affordability, it's our A. That has to do with financial aid and literally affording college, right? So anything to do with paying for college, a lot of that's financial aid, but also understanding when there's a bill that comes up for a student, how to handle that, right? And then life, that's sort of our catch-all, right? That's sort of everything else, right? So we talk about understanding what's going on with the student, because we recognize that what's happening outside of the classroom can impact what's happening inside the classroom. So to be truly successful in college, we need to focus on more than just the D, E, and A, right? Though those are very important. And so sometimes that includes outside resources, includes, things like counseling or finding, housing, immigration, resources that to support a student, or sometimes just being someone to listen, right? To be an empathetic ear for that student. And so in our success program, most success advisors have a caseload of between 80 and 90, depending on their seniority with the organization. And last year, which is the year we'll be talking about, we supported 325 first-year students within the success program. And just on overall in our program, 69% of our success students graduate within 6 years. So when we looked at the success program, we thought about, we were always kind of iterating, thinking about new ideas, ways we can serve our students. And so a couple of things, we're standing out, right? Seeing differences in participation from students who maybe had been part of the program for a while and maybe had faced some advisor turnover, right? We have really, we support students for 6 years. So we expect that some of our advisors may not be still working with the same students over the course of those 6 years, whether they got promoted within the organization or they are working somewhere else. We recognize that students are not going to have one advisor for 6 years necessarily in many cases. And that was having some impact on students engaging and feeling like, well, I'm only connected to this one person at Bottom Line. And now that they've left, I don't feel as connected to the organization. Along with that, we were noticing and hearing from folks about the sustainability of the role of an advisor and whether there was, sort of burnout or things happening from just the sort of relentless pace of that work. And so what we were hoping to address with what we're about to talk about is better, engaging with students more, increasing their engagement with us, and also improving the experience both for students and advisors. And big picture, if we know we're going to have advisor turnover, how do we make sure we reduce the impact of that turnover on the staff and the students that we work with? So that led to the pilot, which we're going to talk about today. And that is a collective advising model. So instead of advisors having a caseload of roughly 80 to 90 students, we had multiple advisors who served a larger caseload collectively, but they were focused on content based on those deal areas that I just spoke about, right? Those 4 areas that we support students with. Advisors are specializing in different areas of that content. So we wanted to create a stronger first-year experience, right? So our pilot is working specifically with all of our first-year students, right? And trying to approach that work more holistically and recognizing that first-year students have particular needs, and we wanted to address those in a very direct way, and hopefully create more engagement with Bottom Line as an organization. So this past year, like I said, there were 325 first-year students, and they were supported on our collective advising team, or CAT. You're going to hear CAT a lot. That's just an acronym. 4 advisors on that team supported those 325 first years. If you do the rough math, it means that it's basically a comparative caseload size to an individual advisor supporting that 80 to 90 students on the traditional teams. But again, instead of that being divided by 4, it's just a collective support amongst all of the advisor. And then also 1 student experience coordinator, who is another staff member on our team who supported with cohort building activities, as well as student engagement with some of those students on top of what the advisors are doing. So from this pilot, right, it's sort of like an experiment. So we want to understand how this might impact our work. And so when we approached the beginning of the pilot, this is what we wanted to kind of learn from the experience. Number 1, specializing in those deal areas that I spoke about, right? And in particular, degree kind of is pervasive across the academic work is pervasive, but those other 3, employability, affordability, and life, having specialty advisors focus on those areas will improve student outcomes for our students that potentially have differentiated outcomes, right? So we have, without getting too much into the technical details of this, we have 2 groups of students. We call them Success Direct and Access to Success. Our Success Direct students apply directly to the Success program. Our Access to Success students come through our Access, our high school program that Michael spoke about before. And so those Access to Success students historically have performed better in college because they had that extra year of support from Bottom Line. And so we were hoping that this specialized support for first years might address some of those gaps between performance. Secondly, a communal caseload approach. So, I spoke about, again, the idea of a student feeling like my advisor left Bottom Line. I'm no longer connected to that person, so I don't feel connected to Bottom Line. Well, if you start your first year with 4 advisors, you have connections to all of them, you're meeting with all of them, would that increase the connection you feel to Bottom Line as an organization and help you kind of get ready for the fact that next year you might meet with someone different, but you've already gotten used to that and you're not feeling like I only know one person here and that's it. Thirdly, will a communal caseload approach increase student engagement through advisor transitions? That's sort of the flip side of what I was just sharing. And then fourth, will that approach support advisor sustainability? So we're not just looking at student outcomes, right? If we're recognizing that advisors are sometimes feeling there is some sort of like burnout, or there's like the pace of the work is difficult, will sharing the load across multiple advisors help advisors feel that their work stream is more sustainable? And so we kind of organized those questions and things we were trying to figure out into specific goals that we wanted to be able to measure. So students having a greater affiliation with Bottom Line as an organization, not just an individual advisor. Specialize it, the goal to specialize across those deal areas to create more specific and intensive advising. With that, we wanted to adhere more strongly to our Bottom Line roadmaps. So we have very detailed curriculum that outlines how we work with students, and particularly for first years, there's a first year roadmap. And we wanted to, we hoped that having this specialization and having this sort of like approach that focuses on the first years as a specific community of students with specific needs would help us better align to those roadmaps for first years, because you know, an advisor doesn't have first years, sophomores, juniors, seniors, and they're all supporting with different things. They're actually all supporting a group of students that are in roughly similar places, right? And then last, we wanted to measure whether there would be increased advisor satisfaction from this team approach, so that folks could kind of support each other in this kind of collective model. So that happened, what we just spoke about. That was our first year of the pilot. So I'm going to fast forward you from last summer to this summer, where we've now kind of completed that first year of the pilot. So what did we learn? We learned a few things. When it came to student engagement, we were able to exceed the fall meeting goal for students, right, which was a 2.5 average, so 2 to 3 meetings per student. We were able to meet and exceed that goal. 88% of students completed a September check-in, compared to only 52% the previous year. And then at the end of the semester, 81% of students completed what we call like a service plan at the end of the year, which again, meeting, slightly exceeding our goal of 80%. And then on this slide, you'll see some of the spring data as well. And you'll see that we met or exceeded our goals in the spring as well. So the spring engagement, once again, we had 2.57 average, you know, which again exceeds our goal. We met our goal of 90% FAFSA completion, which of course is very important for, that's the, you know, free application for federal student aid. That is a very necessary application for students to get financial aid. And so super proud of that number. And then we landed at 66% of our students completing what we call employability milestones. So I talked about those roadmaps. These are milestones that we believe students need to complete in order to be career ready by the time they graduate. So we hope that students will complete 3 each year. And, you know, we far exceeded our goal to reach 66% by the end of the spring. And then you can just look at the numbers at the bottom and see that our engagement was higher this year than last year with first years, and from having this kind of holistic approach. And this was our first year back having in-person meetings. We felt it was super important, because these were first year students, to set the tone of having meetings in person. And so 70% of students on this team had in-person meetings, compared to a much lower percentage of students second year and above. Again, that makes sense because those students had gotten used to meeting with us on Zoom, right? But we wanted to kind of set the expectation with our new first years. We're going to be meeting with you on campus in person, and hopefully that'll kind of play out over the next 4 or 5 years for those students, so that they will consistently be comfortable having meetings in person. So that's a lot of data, it's a lot of numbers. Big picture and sort of anecdotally, there's some things that we learned. So we had some successes. The team approach, increasing staff flexibility, that goal we had, that happened, right? You'll hear a little more from one of our staff members later on about how this played out. But ultimately, if you have multiple advisors supporting the same student, that takes some of the pressure off of you individually to offer that, to be the only person to support that student, right? So for example, if you want to take a sick day, you know, need to take a sick day, or you know, you're busy, or you have another student that needs something, right? There's more people to take the pressure off, and a lot of advisors spoke about that ability to be more flexible with the team than when you have an individual caseload, and if you're not supporting that student, there's no one else who is necessarily responsible for them. Specialization. So again, the employability, affordability, and life-focused advisors were able to do specialized training and professional development, and kind of gain some expertise in that particular area, because that was the area they were specializing on with students, right? You'll hear from Gloria a little later about what that looked like for her with her affordability work. Our student experience coordinator, who we spoke about a little earlier, she was for the first time sitting on a team with advisors, and was able to have an impact with this team in a much more direct way than she had in the past, because she was much more embedded in the work that was happening with first-year students. She's been involved with kind of shepherding our first-year students into the program, and having a person that could focus on engagement with them outside of the sort of advising space. I mentioned the flexibility. We also had some staffing changes. One of our advisors during the year last year was promoted to manager, which was super exciting. And we also had an advisor go on temporary leave. And so for those two reasons, we had sort of like gaps in support from advisors, which with the traditional caseload is difficult to manage. With this caseload, there was less disruption in services for those students, because they were used to meeting with multiple advisors anyway. And so they didn't even necessarily see the difference, right? Because they're still going to have other advisors who can support them. And then last, a traditional advisor works with maybe 3 to 4 of our target colleges. Because we worked with all of the first-year students, we worked with all of our target colleges across New York State. And so that meant that advisors were able to develop more knowledge beyond just those 3 or 4. With these successes, we had some challenges. Technology, you could just say technology. That's a challenge for a lot of things at Bottom Line at times, right? We have some really sophisticated data tracking systems in place, but those systems are set up for a model where a student has one advisor. And so we ran into a lot of challenges around how do we adapt these kind of technical tools that we're using to track data and to better support students? How do we adapt those to fit with a collective caseload model and still sort of work without breaking? So that was something we were kind of constantly figuring out over the course of last year. Communication gray areas, right? If you don't have a direct, if you have one advisor, it's very clear who you should speak to about anything, right? If you're the advisor, you know that you're responsible for those students. With our team, right, someone might have met with a student and have a follow-up with them, but then it's unclear kind of who is the next person to respond to them if something else comes up before the next meeting. So we had to work out all of those kind of logistical issues. Relationship building. So again, we're hoping these students are better connected to Bottom Line as an organization. However, when it comes to individual relationship building, right, an individual advisor might meet that one student 2 or 3 times throughout the year at most, maybe less, versus 6 times if you are their only advisor. So it's harder to build that deep individualized relationship with the student. I talked a little before about the difference in outcome between our students who start in the Access program versus the student who go directly into the Success program. Those gaps persisted on the first-year team, which is not surprising, but it means that we need to think more deeply and continue to try things to figure out how to better address that gap. This was not able to get rid of that gap in our first-year population. And then last, it's the flip side of one of our successes, right? Advisors did have more knowledge of all of our target colleges, but because they didn't specialize in just 3 or 4 colleges, right? Their specialty was a deal area, right? But they didn't get the specialized knowledge that you might get when you only work with certain colleges. And so that means that we have to work harder and connect with other advisors on the team sometimes when certain really specific issues come up for those colleges that we want to make sure we have information about. All right, so that was quite a lot of information, all very quickly. Appreciate you all bearing with me for that. So I'm gonna open it up very briefly for questions, maybe 1 or 2 questions at most, because then I really want to spend most of the rest of this time with our advisor and student. So maybe 1 or 2 questions anybody has before we move on to that next section. Okay, I'm gonna take that as a sign that I explained everything perfectly well. So there's no possible questions. redesign ideas. We will get to that actually. So I'll preview it in a moment, but we're gonna talk about this year, right? The year we're in now. We are continuing the pilot as a sort of spoiler for the rest of the presentation. So we will definitely talk about that. Okay, so are we doing this? I'm sorry, do I have the wrong slide, Imsha? Gotcha, perfect. I wanted to introduce two people that I've already kind of referred to, but really they're the experts here, and they're going to be the real stars of the show. So I'm going to start with Gloria. She's a senior success advisor on CAT was last year and still for this year. Allyn is a second year bottom line student. So last year she was part of CAT. She was a first year student on that team and is now supported by an individual advisor as a second year. And so we're going to hear a lot about their experiences. So I'm going to ask them a bunch of questions, but if you have any questions that you'd like them to answer, please drop them in the chat, and we'll try to circle around to those questions as well. So just to start off, I'm going to ask both of you to share. I'll start with you, Gloria. What made you decide to join Bottom Line? And also just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Gloria. I am a senior success advisor in Bottom Line. This is my second year in Bottom Line overall. And yeah, I joined the CAT team primarily because when the idea was brought up, I was like, this is amazing. Like getting first year students the support that they need, because as like folks go on through college, you realize that the needs change, and first years are like very vulnerable in that stage, especially our Success Direct students, because they didn't get that time with the Access folks. Sometimes they need like a lot more support versus like other students. So when I heard that we were going to create a group just to support those students, I thought it was amazing. And with the whole concept of like collective advising, a cohort of advisors, like supporting a group of students, I felt like what Dan had mentioned, that it takes a lot of pressure off the advisors also, because there are other people there to support students. And with the whole specialization thing, it was amazing. So that's why I joined CAT.
Awesome. Thank you, Gloria. I'm going to turn it over to Allyn. So same question for you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then also what made you decide to join Bottom Line.
Yeah, of course. Good morning. My name is Allyn Flores. I'm in my second year at Lehman College. So I decided to join Bottom Line because usually when from my experience in high school, I felt like it's very hard for you to meet with your own counselor because they're all over the place. And I feel like to get a one-on-one, it was pretty hard for me to not, how do you say, have a connection with my counselor. But I felt like because he was hearing other people, and then I felt like there wasn't really time there to have a one-on-one. But I've noticed when I actually have the space with my advisor, it actually felt, good, because I was able to get heard and, listen to. Another thing is doing a college application is not that easy as I thought it was going to be. There is a lot of steps that had to do with it. So I felt like after hearing about Bottom Line, I remember saying, yes, I am going to get as much as help as I need, take advantage of what my English teacher is offering. She basically gave me that opportunity to take that and get that help. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Allyn. So I'm gonna stay on you for a bit, if that's okay. So my next question is, you joined Bottom Line, you just spoke about it, right? You were part of the Access program, so support applying to college, and you had kind of one advisor supporting you. What was the transition like from that program to the Success program, the college program, where you had this team of advisors?
Um, when at first, I felt like either ways it still came to beneficial to me, and it still helped me either ways. So to be able to first, like, be able to first like get help when applying to, um that was very helpful as well. But not only that, but it was also helpful for when I was already in college for my first year, because it was not an easy transition. I felt like it was way different to like being a high schooler. So when I was able to transition back to like taking college classes, it was like hard to get into that organization and putting yourself into a schedule of how to organize yourself. So I felt like I was able to get help from my advisor. And also with, let's say, with financial aid, me personally, I did not know how to really apply for financial aid or TAP. And I say very thank you to to my advisor that helped me complete that. So, and also as well, it was able to have a bigger connection because I was able to actually tell my college experience, because not because like with my advisor that helped me apply, but I'm already in college. So it was nice to be like, oh yeah, they helped me apply here. And they're even helping me more with my college experience or any issues I was going through with my college classes. So I felt like it was helpful, like before even being in college, and then actually now being in college.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious to hear a little more about, you're talking about getting that support that's directly about being currently in college, right? You spoke about financial aid as one piece. Can we just back up a bit? Like, what is a typical meeting with a bottom line advisor like when you're on campus? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, well, when I start my conversations with advisor, Gloria, we first like kind of like do like a recap of what we talked about last meeting, and then we just go along with like how it's going, or like if I'm having any issues, or if there are any questions, or like more so like basically like what's a problem that I'm going through, if I'm having any, and we just go over that. And then more so she starts like giving me like that advice that I needed to hear, or like if I'm having like a problem, more so she tells me like, oh hey, you can do this, you can do that, like a second step thing. And then she asks me like, oh, um like what are you gonna take away from that, like what are your next steps? And that's more so like towards like the end, and then like a few questions, if I need any, if I had to ask any.
Thank you, Eileen, for sharing that. I'm going to circle back to Gloria for a bit, just to give you a little break, and then we'll come back to Eileen. Gloria, you started at Bottom Line working with one caseload, right? A traditional caseload of students, and now you moved to CAT. How did it feel to move to this kind of collective advising model with students versus working with the traditional model?
Okay, so when I started Bottom Line, I think I had like um 3 colleges that I was working with, and it was a mixture of freshmen, sophomore, junior, seniors. So I had to sort of figure out exactly what each group needed so that I could support them, right? So some seniors, like most seniors who were in this phase where if it's time for like renewal of FAFSA or anything like that, like they're good. They don't need your support. They've been doing this for a long time. So being able to identify that, okay, this group of people are okay, versus this group of people need that support. It was a lot of like juggling. And also with like knowing that there are some questions that like there are seniors that are already in clubs, especially those that are like in a way colleges, they're dorming, they are part of the campus community. But with freshmen and some sophomores, you had to have that conversation with them about becoming a part of the campus community. So that was it's like a lot of like learning the different things that folks needed versus transitioning to the CAT team. We were supporting like the same, well, kind of the same folks. There are some freshmen that come in with the knowledge that, hey, I went to this campus, I saw this club, so I'm definitely going to join, versus freshmen that are like, I have no idea what clubs are on the campus. But we still have that conversation with everyone so that we're able to connect them to the campus community. So being able to transition to the CAT team, one, I got to learn a lot about the clubs on the campuses because I had to do the research to be able to sell it to students. And also because we were supporting like a cohort, it was good to be able to tell all of them like, hey, it's time to renew your FAFSA. Let's sit down and do it. There were people that were like, yeah, I'm okay, I can do it. But then majority of our students needed the support. So we're able to schedule that and get them the help that they needed. So that's a difference I noticed.
Thank you, Gloria. Okay, I'm going to go back to Eileen again. I wanted to actually jump into a question I saw in the chat. So this is from Carla in the chat. Thank you for asking this question. So for you, Eileen, did you feel, or do you feel supported or encouraged to proactively reach out to one of your advisors outside of regularly scheduled meetings if they don't reach out first, right? So of course you have your scheduled meetings, but were there ever times that you were reaching out to advisors on your own?
I can say yes. I would say like towards the beginning, I did not, because I felt like, oh, what if I'm bothering them in some way? Like I just didn't want to be a bother or like ask too many questions, because that's sometimes what I tend to do, or like I overthink of what they said, and then I just, a lot of questions just come in. So after the meeting, I'm like, wait, why didn't I ask that? Or like immediately I would like text them personally. But then another thing that I really appreciate from Gloria was that after the meeting, she would reach out to me even after the meeting. Like as soon as the meeting finished, she would ask me, oh, how did you feel about the meeting? Or ask about more so my opinion of how I felt towards that meeting. So I really appreciate that. And then after I saw that connection, I felt like I was able to reach out and ask those questions even outside of those regular meetings. So for example, like if I couldn't wait that whole month or like that monthly check-in, I feel like I was able to reach out to her and ask her for questions that I was eager to ask her. So I felt like I was able to have that connection to be able to ask those questions outside of the meetings.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, Eileen. And I just want to reiterate what Victoria said in the chat, which is that, we're always here to support you. And we would always, I'm sure Gloria will agree, we'd rather have a student communicate with us too much than not enough, right? There really is no such thing as too much. So one more question for you, Eileen, and then I'll shift back to Gloria. Were there specific challenges that you were navigating during the year that Bottom Line was able to support you with? So I know you already mentioned your TAP application. Is there anything else that came up for you when you were connecting with an advisor that advisors were able to help you out with?
Yes, I did have this one issue with one class, and I felt like, I don't know if you remember when I mentioned about my English class, it was very, it was not, I felt like we went to even the topic of the topic of dropping a class because I did not feel comfortable in that class. And when I was having that one-on-one, I was so eager to talk to her about what was going on with that class. And the way she talked me over, I felt it was like, it was the way she talked to me was the way that I wanted to hear that support and be like, okay, don't drop that class. It's only those 4 months, 3 months. It's going to be over. So I felt like I got that help from her, and to be able to talk about at that I remember that call was the most impactful one, because she was able to help me calm down. I felt like she was my therapist in a way. So I felt like I was able to talk to her about what was going on, about the issue I was having with that certain class. So she definitely helped me a lot with that. And even in general, when I was kind of stressing with exams or like exam dates, since I was taking bio, so it was like, it was hard.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. So I'm gonna move back to Gloria. I wanted to ask you about, again, focusing on the collective model, right, with the advisor specialties. Can you provide an example of where you guided a student to a specific advisor to address a specific need? So I'll say many students I think you were able to meet with who had specific financial aid kind of concerns. So that's one for sure. But can you think of an example where you guided a student to either employability or life focused advisors?
Yeah, definitely. And like Dan said, so I had the affordability specialization in the team. So I got to like work with students a lot on financial aid application, TAP, like things like that. And because we had specializations with employability and life also, if I met with a student and say it was a general check-in, we talked about everything that we needed to talk about. And then I asked, say perhaps they wanted to apply to a job or an internship, and they mentioned yes. So that was my cue to, if we had time, to probably go over resumes and a few things, but then also to make sure to follow up with that student, like connect that student to our employability advisors. At that time was like Chloe and Nicole. So to check in with both of them to see whose schedule was like able to accommodate that student at the time that the student needed, so that they can, get the support that they needed to be able to apply to said internships or jobs. And also with life, because we go over the entire deal module during check-in, sometimes things might come up. So say a student was like feeling super stressed. There are a lot of things that we can talk about to make sure the student is feeling a lot better after the meeting, but also after the meeting, we make sure to check in to see, hey, do you feel like it will be beneficial to talk more about this particular situation? And if the student will benefit from that, definitely connect that student to our life advisor, who Katie is like, she's very good at being able to like get students to talk, also get students to share when they're comfortable, so that we can get them the support that they need. So yeah, that's an example.
Thank you, Gloria. So I wanted to ask a question that I saw in the chat from Eric, which was, I'll just read the question. So I'm interested in, from the leadership or advisor perspective, whether heightened accountability for advisors via their peer CAT advisors is an intended aim of the design, and whether intended or unintended, is this a practical, real effect or not? So that, alluding to the idea of shared accountability on the team, right? So I guess from your perspective as an advisor who was part of that shared accountability this past year, how did that model feel for you? With sharing goals with other advisors?
All right. I personally enjoyed it. One, because so we came up with a thing where whoever meets with a student has to write some kind of note about it. So because we have a shared caseload where I could meet with that student next time. So I needed to know what you talked about or anything that stood out to you, so that I can follow up with the student. Like Eileen had mentioned, most oftentimes when you meet, you want to kind of draw back from what a student had talked to you about before, so that you can keep moving forward with it, because things might change. And then when you're done with a student, you also make sure you update what you found out about that student, so that another advisor is able to follow up during that. So that was a good way to, kind of make sure that folks were actually getting to get information from students, so that we are all able to get our work done. And when it came to say outreach, reaching out to students, meeting with students, Dan was hands-on behind the scenes, making sure we got numbers. We were able to schedule students. So because we have a shared caseload, we have a shared Calendly, so we're able to schedule students. It's like a random thing, but every advisor is able to get students on their calendar so that it's not like one person is carrying the entire weight versus others. So we're able to do that. And I think it worked well. And that way we were also able to, like, if an advisor was not able to meet with the student, we were also able to like pivot really quickly so that the students did get the support that they needed.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Gloria. And I would just add from my perspective that the idea of team accountability meant that, you know, from my time at Bottom Line supervising this team, I think our team of advisors and our student experience coordinator had a much stronger connection as a team, or because we were kind of all working with the same students, we all had that same shared accountability. And so rather than a team that happened to be just supervised by the same manager, this was a team that had a reason to be a team, right? And so I felt very like it's been very successful to have a team working together in that particular way. So I really thought that was a positive effect of CAT this past year. All right, so we have a couple more minutes for questions. So I want to ask just a couple more. One question that came up in the chat from Jim, I just wanted to address quickly, and this was, does Bottom Line conduct classroom guidance group sessions that all students are required or encouraged to attend in person or virtually, supporting knowledge and skill development more efficiently, and then later following up with questions on that topic for the one-on-one sessions, so like FAFSA, for example. So I can just quickly take that and say, we do have workshops. We didn't mention that in the presentation, but we've had some specifically for first years. We had FAFSA workshops. We had employability workshops, right? We recognize that first years are going to need a little more support with FAFSA than hopefully a junior who's done it 3 times already. So we do offer those. We also have employability workshops focused on, again, as a first year student, what you're looking for in your career is less developed probably than a junior or senior, right? And so we talk about what are the values, interests, and skills that you need, that you want to focus on when doing a career search, kind of an intro, resume, workshop, those types of things. So those are happening with our first year students specifically, and that's also happening region-wide with larger resume workshops. Again, some of you may have been part of that in the past as a volunteer. And other things like that. So we definitely do that. And then I also wanted to mention our student experience coordinator hosts cohort building activities. And so that can be like socials on campus or other opportunities for Bottom Line students to meet each other. And so those are also part of the intentional first year experience. Okay, I'm going to ask one last question, and that question is to Eileen, and that is, what are you most excited about for in your second year of college?
So for my second year of college, I'm actually doing my prereqs, my prerequisites for nursing. So, you know what they say, that in your second year it gets more intense. So I feel like I would get that support from Bottom Line and trying to like transition to it, or like see any like not options, but like different pathways, because I do want to stick to medical field. So let's say nursing does not work out for me, which I'm going to try my best for that to happen. So I'm mostly excited to see like the classes, how they go along, because they do change in your second year, because that's when you have to apply for the nursing program within Lehman College. So I know it's going to be a lot of organization, studying, having more time to be able to like look back to my past classes as well, because I do need like a refresh more so. And not only that, but I am looking more forward to my second semester, because I personally don't know how my second semester schedule will look like, because of that, because of the going into the second year, well, completing my second year, because that's when I have to declare a major. after the second year. So I'm very excited for it and the guidance I will be receiving.
Thank you so much, Eileen. First of all, let's give a round of applause, and silently or otherwise, for both Eileen and Gloria. And particularly for Eileen, I know everyone in this group is wishing you well in this year. And we'll be seeing you. We'll be seeing you for your meetings this year as well. I think there might have been one or two other questions in the chat. So if anyone, I want to keep us moving, but if anyone wants to jump in and answer any of those last questions via the chat, we can still do that in the next 10 minutes. But I do want to make sure we get a chance to talk about what's next for this team, for CAT. So we can go back to our PowerPoint. Thank you so much. So we just talked about the past year, but I want to talk a little bit about our current academic year, right? So 23 to 24. And like I sort of spoiled for us before, we are continuing the pilot for the second year. And so once again, we have our team. And so this model is continuing. We added a few components. So we've always had summer transition programming at Bottom Line for students, but we are more intentionally connecting that with our first year team, right? Well, if we're working with all first years on the same team, well, it stands to reason that we should support that. We should connect that with our summer transition programming that helps them enter into the Success program, right? So that includes work with as students either apply to the program directly, right, Success Direct, or for our Access to Success students. What are the things you need to know to be successful in college that we want to talk about in a summer orientation? What are some of the things that we need to make sure you complete on what we call a checklist meeting, right? And then kind of celebrating students in what we call our Success Send-Off. Our goal is to use that as an opportunity to address that gap that we spoke about between Access to Success and Success Direct students. We're going to see soon whether that was effective at all. Observing the transition. So for folks like Eileen, who were part of CAT and are now working with a traditional advisor, obviously it's been very successful for Eileen, specifically for our larger group of those 325 students. We're very curious to see the data over the next year or 2 or 4 years to see if this had any impact in engagement with Bottom Line. We're really not going to know the answer to that for a little while, but we'll see if that's making students more successful with transitioning between different advisors. Redesigning the first year experience. So I mentioned our student experience coordinator. She's been really involved in both that summer transition programming and also all of the work that's happening with the first year team. And so this year we've included her much more intentionally all the way back in the winter when we started the recruitment process of our newest students, so that she's kind of one of the first faces that those students get to know at Bottom Line, because she'll be working with them throughout their first year. So we're hoping that creates a little more continuity for students. And then last, the difference for this year is instead of working with all of our first year students, we're working with a good portion of our first year students, but not all of them, which gives us a comparison group, right? So when we're looking at data next year, we'll be able to see how did first years do who were not on CAT and how did first years do who were on CAT. So that's going to be really exciting for us to actually be able to dig in and evaluate this in a little more strategic way. So this year, numbers wise, right? Like I said, last year we had 325 first years on CAT supported by 4 advisors. This year we're down to 270 first years because we have other first years who are not on CAT, right? I think there's about 60 or so. So it's similar overall numbers. And so therefore they're supported by only 3 advisors rather than 4. And still the 1 student experience coordinator. And so again, similar structure, but just different numbers. And again, giving us that opportunity to kind of compare and contrast directly between first year populations who are supported by a collective caseload versus 1 single advisor. So we've already started that process, right? We're a few weeks into our September meetings, right, that are happening now, and we will continue throughout this academic year. So we're really excited to take what we learned last year and apply it this year. And so I'm really excited about what CAT's going to look like in this academic year. So once again, thank you all so much for listening. I'm going to pass it back to Victoria.
Thanks so much, Dan. And thank you everybody for joining us today, and specifically to Dan for leading the collective advising team, for Gloria and the other advisors, and for Allyn for spending some time with us this morning. We really appreciate you taking time out of a busy day to join us and share more about your experiences. And thank you to all who joined from an external perspective. We always love sharing innovative ideas about our work. We hope this helped you understand a little bit more about what we're focusing on this year at Bottom Line. If you have additional questions or want to talk more, we always encourage you to reach out to myself, to Michael, Managing Director of Programs, or to Dan directly around the collective advising team. And also, we want you to stay engaged. So subscribe to our newsletter or join our volunteer mentoring platform, Bottom Line Connect. And we also, Dan spoke a little bit about career development opportunities for our students. We have a couple of those coming up. If you want to volunteer your time and work directly with amazing students like Allyn, you can go ahead and scan that QR code and see what's coming up. So thank you again for spending some time with us this morning. We hope this was a great start to your Friday, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and a fantastic weekend ahead. So thanks all. Take care.